College Football Insiders coming to you live on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm in the Brandon Marcello chair. My name is Richard Johnson. I am joined by my guys, Chris Hummer, Shahan Jayaraja, and John Talty. Big day in our world today here on CBS 247 Sports with the 2025 Freshman All-America team dropped by our guy, Chris Hummer. Some noteworthy players on the list: Amari Adams from Clemson, Elijah Griffin at Georgia, Grayson Littleton at Texas on offense. Of course, Bryce Underwood from Michigan, Juan Gaston from Georgia, Dallas Wilson, Florida, and Decorey Moore at Oregon. These are some guys who I think can shape the college football playoff race. Jeremiah Smith, Colin Simmons, and Ryan Williams certainly did last year. So, Chris, as you were putting this list together, first of all, kind of take us behind the scenes on how you put this list together, and then let's talk about how some of these guys we think could have an impact on the college football playoff race.
Well, first, like, a list like this is an inexact science, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, a lot of times freshmen play for situational reasons. Let's say the starter who gets hurt week 6, and that's when your breakout freshmen happen. But this list is like talking to a lot of people at schools, camp intel season, just be like, hey, which freshmen are standing out? And these are guys coming up a lot. A lot of these guys are already getting first team reps. A lot of these guys are going to start from day one. So I think the job of this list is not necessarily to get everyone, but to identify a lot of the players who matter during the season. And I can feel pretty confident in saying a lot of these guys are going to shape the direction of how the season goes. You mentioned last year, like Jeremiah Smith, like what would Ohio State have been without him? And like if Oregon is going to be in the national title mix, like I think Decorey Moore is a perfect place to start. It's not like we haven't talked about Decorey Moore this offseason, but he is somebody, the number one receiver in this class. Somebody from Duncanville High School out in Texas I've seen play numerous times live. It was an absolute freak show for them. Almost 3,000 yards receiving his junior and senior seasons at Duncanville against the best competition possible. Has gone to Oregon and immediately established himself as a likely starter. This is somebody they're going to have to really rely on after the Evan Stewart injury. And that's a guy I would start off from the jump. Like if Oregon is going to play their way into the playoff and play their way in the national title mix, Decorey Moore is going to be a dude.
Yeah, Chris, like you mentioned, obviously a guy in our backyard who, in the DFW area, who has been a big-time player for many years. He played with Keelan Russell in high school, now one of the quarterbacks at Alabama. But, when you look at a player like Moore, I mean, does he have that physical readiness, the way that Jeremiah Smith did, to be a day one contributor?
Yeah, I mean, like, I know he was a member of Andrew Ivins' freak list last year. Like, Decorion's a guy. I'm trying to pull up some of his times, but like you're talking about like a 10-4 time in the 100, right? With Decorey Moore. He's a lot smaller than Jeremiah Smith, right? Like Decorion's somebody who's going to work inside a lot of the time. He's like 5'11", 200 pounds, but he is somebody that lives in the open field. He eats up yards after the catch. He's very difficult to tackle. He is not going to make the spectacular plays on the outside you saw Jeremiah Smith make week after week for Ohio State, but he is going to make a lot of things happen in the open field, which really fits in well to what Oregon likes to do from a timing perspective with their offense. Will Stein gets the ball out quickly, gets the ball in the hands of his playmakers, creates space, and Decorey Moore is a guy who can take advantage of that.
Chris, that's a really important point you make, I think, about Will Stein's offense and Decorey Moore's fit. Decorey Moore's not going to be asked to do the things that Jeremiah Smith was asked to do, especially banging on the outside. They're just two different players. They're built differently, but he fits because of the offensive architecture. And that's why I think it's interesting to how everybody's just basically saying like Decorey Moore can go day one. I mean, that really tells you something about his talent. John, on this list, as far as college football playoff impact is concerned, who jumps out to you?
Yeah, this is kind of top of mind for me because I'm going to see him week 1. But DJ Pickett at LSU, I think, it's well established LSU's defense was not where it needed to be a year ago. We've talked about it on the show. They were very aggressive, both in the portal and then also in high school recruiting with a guy like DJ and improving that secondary. And this is a school that, and I'm kind of working on a story about this, school that was known for DBU, right? Whether it's Honey Badger, all these, guys that have come through over the years. And that kind of fell off. And it felt like they really kind of went back to the basics. Let's make sure that we are much stronger in this area. And it's why there's, a lot of, I think, optimism around LSU about why they're going to be considerably improved in the secondary. And DJ's a guy, and I think Chris hit on this in his story. Might not start right off the bat, but the talent is there. He's going to be a contributor, and you could see as the season goes on, him getting better and better, and that if they are in that playoff mix, guys like DJ are going to have to be contributors and maybe shut down a guy like Moore in a playoff game.
I will. Sorry, Richard, I didn't mean to cut you off. I will say, like, I've talked to a couple people in that program that think DJ, like, are saying DJ's a guy that should be starting right away, or like they would like him to, because he is that type of talent about elevator on the outside for them. And I mean, just talking to people around LSU, like, they're a lot more bullish on where that defense is this year as compared to this time last year. So there's a lot of optimism there, and bringing a guy like DJ Pickett is a big reason why.
Chris, Elijah Griffin is on your list here for the Georgia Bulldogs. Obviously, Georgia is trying to find that next true interior stalwart after the Jordan Davis era and Jalen Carter era of Georgia defense is past us. Can Elijah Griffin be that player? It's a high bar, but can he be that player?
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about their defensive line at Georgia. Like, it's been good, but Georgia's defense hasn't really been what we think of Georgia's defense the last couple of years. Like, I'm pulling up the stat now, but I believe Georgia was like pretty like mid for their standards. I think they were in the 30s in both yards allowed per rush.
Clip it there. Georgia's defense mid. Chris Hummer.
No, please
aggregate it.
Cut it. Cut the clip.
Awesome. But by their standards, right? Like, this is a defensive line that was churning out first-round draft pick after first-round draft pick. And obviously they had a couple last year. But the front-end production wasn't as dominant as it's been in recent years. Like, there were times last season where, in terms of like yards allowed before the first touch, essentially, Georgia was like in the 30s or 40s. And it's just not the production you have at Georgia normally. And I think there's a lot of optimism in that building about what Christian Miller is going to be for them. I think he is a true national breakout candidate at DT. But if you're looking for another guy who can be a difference maker, Elijah Griffin is that guy. Like, this is the highest ranked defensive lineman to ever sign with Georgia under Kirby Smart. Like, think about that and all the dudes they've had come through there. And he has been impressive from the start at Georgia. Like, people in that program have really raved about him. And I think as the season goes along, he's going to carve out more and more snaps and be a big part of that rotation.
Chris, I'm curious, when you think about Georgia's defense, how much of that drop off do you think is talent being more dispersed now in the NIL portal era? We all know that it's harder than ever to stockpile these guys. Or is it a coaching thing? Dan Lanning being gone to Oregon, people think very highly of Glenn Schumann. They did the Schumann-Will Muschamp combo for a stretch. But is it a talent issue, coaching issue, some combo of the two? I'm curious what you think.
Well, I definitely need to emphasize, like, just so I don't get clipped out here in the world. Like, I think Georgia's defense is still very elite.
You already said they're mid. You can't backtrack. We have.
Yeah, well, I'm backpedaling as hard as I can. I'm trying to prevent any catches from people in the chat. But
I'm actually going to text this clip to Kirby Smart just so he sees it. Like, it's a little bulletin board material for the boys.
I've been clipped before. I've been sent messages about that from some people in coaching staffs before. But I think it's more about the depth than anything, right? Like, it is harder than ever, especially at a position like DT, to hold on to quality depth. And I think
everyone wants them. Yeah,
everybody wants it. Georgia's third string defensive tackle is going to start a lot of other places. It's just the reality. Like, that's how talented that room is. And it's difficult to maintain that competitive development, not just development, but like really push a player without him jumping in the portal. And I think that's something everybody struggles with, including Georgia, which, like, frankly, like, compared to some of the big dogs in NIL, like, no pun intended, is maybe not been quite as aggressive.
Yep.
So all those things play together. And when you have less depth and when you can't rotate 6 or 7 like draft picks at DT every year, like, the production can sometimes go downhill. And I think it's trending back the right direction. I haven't heard a bad thing about Glenn Schumann personally. Like, everybody I talk to considers him to be one of the really big rising stars in sport. So it's hard to identify a scheme thing, but I definitely think depth affects that.
Well, and I do think that Georgia, for how well they recruit, when they won their national championships, they've been a developmental program. Like, you look at Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, these aren't necessarily the top ranked guys that they've gotten. They're guys who worked over the course of multiple years. And I think that, for example, a player like Bear Alexander is one in previous years, probably stays with the program. Well, USC comes in with a big bag, obviously, and convinces him to leave. He leaves USC a couple years after that. Like, that's the kind of player who maybe would have been starring on a defense like last season. And I think the other piece too, I remember I had a tweet back in 21 or 22 or something like that. Like, man, how many titles is Texas A&M going to swing by the fact that they accumulated all of the best players from that 2022 recruiting class and kind of did nothing with them? I mean, think of somebody like Walter Nolan. Maybe in a different type of world, he's at Alabama or Ohio State or Georgia. And so I think we're going to start getting back to that as we have more traditional high school recruiting, as we have revenue sharing being a more realistic part of this. But it's become, I think, harder than ever to take a guy who's pretty highly recruited, keep him on campus for multiple years, and get him into the NFL. Guys just don't want to do that anymore, especially at these 5-star positions. If you have a player like Elijah Griffin who's willing to do that, that's how Georgia gets back to true business like we saw in 2021 and 22.
Maybe not a direct impact on the college football playoff race, but he's the most high-profile freshman in college football is Michigan's Bryce Underwood. Chris, hasn't been officially named the starter, and I feel like we have this conversation like a couple times on the Insiders, like he's not officially the starter, but we know how much money they're paying him, so he's probably going to be the starter. He's going to be going week 1 behind center against New Mexico, right?
Yeah, I would be floored if he was not the starter in week 1. I think everybody around that program expects Bryce Underwood to be that guy. I think his work in spring, the offseason and fall camp has put him in position to be that guy. I think people forget with the Bryce Underwood discussion, he turned 18, I think this week. Like, this is one of the youngest players in college football, and he's obviously going to have a ton on him, but like 4-year starter in high school for a really good program in Detroit. Has stepped in right away, obviously as a physical freak, but has done everything Michigan's needed him to do from a leadership and like schematic standpoint, growing within the scheme, kind of learning to operate it. I mean, obviously, like, you're going to be more limited with a true freshman quarterback than you would be with somebody like JJ McCarthy, who was in that program for 3 years. But like, I think there's a lot of optimism there about what Bryce Underwood could be. And I think they're ready to start that era of Michigan football right away in week 1. I would be surprised if Bryce Underwood wasn't starting.
From the playoff impact guys to some of the more under the radar players on this list, I look at Demetrius Samuels from Syracuse. He's a guy who's going to play both ways, probably more on defense and offense, but that's there. Spike Sowell's at NC State, a guy who is trying to continue the lineage that NC State has had of really good offensive linemen that's kind of dropped off the last year or two. And then a player like Michael Fasusi, Chris, who at Oklahoma, don't know if he's going to start week 1, but you have to imagine that's a player that gets on the field at some point for the Sooners.
Yeah, they invested a lot in Michael Fasusi, and investing is a really nice term for paid a lot of money for him to go there. And yeah, like Oklahoma's offensive line, we watched it last year, right? Like, it was a disaster. Like, their wide receiver room was devastated by injuries, and for whatever reason, it was a combination of injuries, like some bad portal takes and a couple other things. Like, Bill Bedenball's offensive line, which is usually one of the best in college football, like, really struggled. And Michael Fasusi probably isn't going to start right now. He's been in a battle during fall camp to potentially start. But I think it's just one of those situations where, like, eventually the most talented guy, as he continues to acclimate to the college game, is going to get on the field. And I would have felt weird not including him on this list. Bill Bedenball's been very positive about him entire fall camp. Like, he speaks glowingly about him, and he doesn't speak glowingly about many freshmen in his history. And I just think it's one of those situations where he's the most athletic lineman in the entire class, like an absolute freak on the edge, at least to protecting the quarterback. And I would be shocked if he wasn't on the field a lot for Oklahoma at some point this season.
Who is not on this list that hurt your bleeding heart to leave off, Chris? What's one freshman player who really you came down to the wire on about including on the freshman All-American team?
Oh, man, there's a couple. Javian Boggs at Florida State is somebody that at receiver, I think, is going to have a really big year for them. I think I could look really silly for leaving him off. He is somebody that I'm very optimistic is going to have a huge year. Marquise Davis at Missouri, a running back was a strong consideration. He's going to be their number 2 back most likely now, but I think by the end of the season, like he is somebody that could have a really huge year. There's a couple of edge players that I'm really high on. Marco Jones at Texas A&M, I think is going to be a significant contributor for them. He's killed it in the spring, killed it in fall camp. We mentioned him last week. I could see somebody like Ches Coleman at Penn State, another edge rusher, a freshman, like having a big impact. It's really like, frankly, it's mostly edge and wide receiver. I think those are positions where you see guys get on the field and running back, but also like we'll talk about them in a second, but there's plenty of quarterbacks this year who are going to have an impact on this season. And it was weird to have a couple quarterbacks to choose from among true freshmen.
Well, and I did want to ask, you mentioned Florida State, Osman Kroma being somebody getting on the list. I mean, obviously Florida State is really, really deep at running back. What kind of do you kind of feel like he's a player who could break into the lineup there?
Absolutely. I mean, the best thing to be in college football, in my opinion, is a running back in Gus Malzahn's offense, right? Like he runs the rock and he's not afraid to make one running back the bell cow. And I don't know if Osman Kroma is going to be the guy from the second the season starts for Florida State, but so many people in that program are optimistic about his talent level, what he's shown in fall camp. He is, again, like was highly compensated to go to Florida State. They invested a lot in him as well. So those things all pair together. And when you combine that with his production during fall camp, like he is somebody in that system that we could look up in November or December, and he might have 800 plus yards, like especially if he gets going early. Like that's somebody I think is going to be really key to Florida State season.
Going to take a quick break on College Football Insiders. When we come back, America's favorite August segment, Camp Intel. Stick with us on the College Football Insiders.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the College Football Insiders. If you're watching us on YouTube, remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications when we go live. We're also in your podcast feed under College Football Insiders, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever podcasts are given away for free. Let's talk some camp intel, guys. Fellas, our long national nightmare is over. Notre Dame has named a starting quarterback despite Kenny Minchey's push for the job. Notre Dame has announced CJ Carr, grandson of former Michigan head coach Lloyd Carr, as its starting quarterback. We have talked about this Notre Dame quarterback race for quite some time on the College Football Insiders amongst us. Shahan, they finally named somebody. They've settled on somebody. What do you think this says about Notre Dame heading into this season?
Well, I was a little surprised that they named it when they did and that it was CJ Carr so definitively. You know, obviously this battle has gone on into camp, and I think that it says a lot about Kenny Minchey and how they feel about him, that they kept it going this long. But I think that what CJ Carr gives them is a true pocket passer, which is something that they haven't had with consistency for a while. Obviously, Sam Hartman kind of gave them a little bit, but this is a different type of player. This is somebody with a quick release, somebody who's used to running a pro-style offense. And I want people to remember, they're coordinated by Mike Denbrock, the same offensive coordinator who was behind Jaden Daniels' Heisman season. So this is an offense that I expect to be more dynamic. I expect it to look a little more traditional than what we saw last year. Of course, Riley Leonard's passing struggles really shaped what they did last year. I don't think they're going to run the quarterback as much, but with a running back in Jeremiah Love, who they're excited about, with some good receivers like Jaden Greathouse on the outside, I think that this is going to look more like a traditional Notre Dame offense.
Yeah, for me with Notre Dame, it's really, really contingent on what they have at wide receiver. We talk about Jaden Greathouse. What they have at wideout, they've just been so lacking. I mean, since we're talking about like Will Fuller days, they've been so lacking at big play wide receiver threat. That to me is what really matters here for Notre Dame. Obviously, Riley Leonard was so great with his legs last year that you thought that Kenny Minchey's mobility was something that was giving him a leg up, or at least helping him push for the race for starting quarterback with Notre Dame. But yeah, Sean, like you said, like, can you turn around and hand it to number 4? Like, let's get the guy who can do that most effectively, and we'll go from there. John,
Richard, I will say real quick, like Notre Dame is very bullish on Malachi Fields, the receiver they took from Virginia. Like, there were a lot of people in the personnel space, like during transfer portal season, that thought he might have been the best receiver in the portal when he went in during the winter. That's a really big addition for them. I don't think it's been talked about enough nationally. Like, he's a true number one threat for them. Whether the ball gets delivered consistently, I think remains a question. But talking to people around the Notre Dame program, I think that was as close as it gets. So we've already discussed that. But I think CJ gives them a little bit more from a big play perspective with his arm, and that might have made a bit of a difference. But I'm sorry, John, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You crushed it.
Do we expect, John, do you expect Notre Dame to be significantly better on offense with Carr and a slightly different offensive system? I think for me, with all the injuries that they had up front, especially during the college football playoff run, you're kind of limping through the college football playoff run. And obviously they limped all the way to to the national championship game. So it's not like they were hampered. But will they be significantly better on offense with obviously more health, but a different quarterback at the controls?
We'll see. I mean, it's so interesting because, I can remember being at the title game and just watching them run Riley over and over and over again. And it was like the true definition of like win the battle, lose the war. That you just knew like they gave it all their first drive, they scored, and that was all they had. And so you would think that there's some more versatility. As you mentioned, I think the offensive line should be better, assuming they stay healthy. But I mean, I think we talked about it on one of our work calls the other day, but like, their opener against Miami has probably not gotten nearly enough national hype, in part because of Ohio State, Texas, and Clemson, LSU. Like, it's kind of gotten relegated to third or fourth, but like, that's a huge game. It's at Miami. That's a very hard situation for, a quarterback to start his first game. So I think that's, there's no time for CJ Carr to ramp up here. Right? He's getting thrown into the fire right off the bat against a Miami team that I think a lot of us expect to make the playoff and to be, very competitive to win the ACC this year. So that's going to be the early kind of first test. But on paper, for the reasons you described, I think there's reasons to believe that this offense could be better. But, there is a part of me that, and I was talking to someone about this the other day, that CJ Carr was set up to be the guy here, and he ultimately wins. But when it drags out as long as it does, to outsiders at least, it's an indication their situation might not be as good as they thought. And so I think there's some people, and talked to someone who's playing Notre Dame this year the other day, who view this as an opportunity that maybe it's not quite as good as they thought. So we'll see how much Miami tests them in week one and how much pressure they put on CJ.
Well, and I think the other piece of this too, right, is like, there's the idea of a more balanced, structured offense, for example. But like, having a quarterback that can bulldoze 5 yards almost every play is also a pretty good offense in itself. I mean, obviously they got very option and zone read oriented, but like, it was effective even against the best teams in the country. It was largely effective up until that Ohio State game. So you definitely increase the ceiling with having a player like CJ Carr who can give them some big playability. And I think in college football these days, you require big playability to truly contend for championships, but you also lower the floor quite a bit when, you know what, if they become predictable offensively, if CJ Carr on the short to intermediate stuff is not consistent, then all of a sudden you don't have that running component with the quarterback position that really causes some stressors with the amount that you're able to, amount of math you're able to win, essentially. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. I think, like you said, it's Miami week 1, and then I believe it's Texas A&M week 2 as well. So their hardest games of the season are arguably in week 1 and week 2. They at least have to split those games to have a chance to have the season that they want to have.
Let's reset some of the more intriguing quarterback battles across college football. First at Auburn, obviously, many of us have seen the social media clip of Hugh Freeze not exactly being thrilled with one rep from his quarterback, Jackson Arnold. But Freeze said recently that he may play 3 quarterbacks, Deuce Knight, Jackson Arnold, and Ashton Daniels, against Baylor in that very, very high-profile opening game that Auburn has. John, what is going on the Plains? That Auburn offense is really talented around the quarterback situation, one of the best wide receiver rooms in the SEC, if not the best running back room. It has some young standouts, and the offensive line, really, really good. But behind center, what exactly do they have?
It's getting weird. Auburn is just So great for headlines. That's been living in the state of Alabama over the last week or two. No short of things to talk about, especially with the recent claiming of national championships. But I think there's a couple of things at play here. One, for all the reasons that you described, Richard, like if Jackson Arnold, who we assume is going to be the starter, is even an improvement over what they had a year ago, this team should take a major leap. I mean, there's so many things went against their way in so many weird ways last year. The talent, talking to multiple people around the SEC, like this is a team that people view as very talented. And it's also a team that, talking to some agents, like if Hugh Freeze goes down this year, there's a lot of guys who would love to take over that job because they feel like the talent base is so strong. So there's a lot to like. I can remember when they took Arnold, hearing skepticism from different people around the league of like, that's an interesting pick, knowing how critical that spot is. There are other QBs that maybe would have made more sense, but that's the guy they went with. We'll see, how it works out. The 3 QB thing doesn't worry me as much. I mean, again, like anytime Hugh Freeze talks about something, it gets weird. And that's part what I think adds to the kind of conversation around is like, he just can't explain himself in a way that is concise. But I think part of what all types of coaches are dealing with right now, and I think Chris hit on it earlier, is like you're trying to manage guys possibly leaving, checking out. Like you want to keep it, kind of want to make people feel like they're still in the hunt, that there's still an opportunity for them, that if Jackson's not the guy or somebody gets hurt, that they're ready to go and jump in. So I think some of it's just kind of QB management from Hugh, but I still expect Arnold to be the guy. And he's probably one of the guys who was amongst the most pressure on him this year, especially in week 1. It's another game that probably isn't getting enough talk about, but Baylor's a really tough opponent for Auburn week 1.
Shahan, you've had great insight on BYU's QB race during camp. Bear Bachmeier, QB1. How did that race shake out during camp?
Well, and I want people to remember, like, he didn't arrive until the summer after transferring from Stanford. This is somebody who didn't have a whole lot of time to learn the offense, but to listen to offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick, he said, we feel like we can use the whole playbook with him. We feel like he's ready. He's prepared to throw any pass, to do anything. We don't have to hold anything back. And that's rare, of course, for a true freshman quarterback. We talked last week when we kind of put out some smoke about this, that ultimately, like, one of the reasons that BYU was so excited about this team was because they felt like he was further along than anybody expected. He comes from a football family. He has an older brother, Hank, who was a college football quarterback. I think that they've done a great job of making sure that he's ready for this moment. And again, I think that he has done such a great job of also stepping up as a leader, is some of what I've heard from camp. He's somebody who, even though he's only an 18-year-old freshman, already has the respect of a lot of guys in that room. So it's big shoes to fill. I mean, Jake Retzlaff was a dynamic player for BYU last season, but I think that it was also a decision that Kalani Sitake had to make in a lot of ways. I mean, when you talk about the teams that have what it takes to contend for a Big 12 championship, it's the teams that can be dynamic offensively. It doesn't mean that every play you have to win, but I think that you have to be able to create big plays. And when you look at this quarterback room, McKay Hillstead, a former Utah State quarterback, and Trayson Borgett, they're just two guys who have not shown that ability even when playing at the group of 5 level. So the upside is worth it, I think, in the case of Bear Bachmeier. And they also, by the way, will be favored pretty handily in their first 6 games, which gives them a great on-ramp to just make sure that he's ready.
Elsewhere out west at UNLV, Alex Orji again in a QB battle in August. Alex Orji, Anthony Calandrea. Dan Mullen says they'll both play in the week 0 opener that UNLV has. I just think it's interesting because Dan Mullen does know how to operate frankly, a 2-quarterback system. I mean, Florida won a national championship in 2006 with Dan Mullen as the offensive coordinator running a 2-quarterback system. So he knows how to do it. He knows how to run it. And so we'll see how long this is going to take. I think it's the concept of Calandrea being the passing quarterback and Alex Orji being the rushing quarterback is kind of tantalizing. Why not, man? Heck, throw them out there both at the same time and let's have some fun, Dan. I know you can cook it up in the lab, some football plays. Let's get weird. Let's get interesting there, Dan Mullen, possibly in Vegas, but we'll see how that shakes out after their actual game reps. John Talty, take us to Tulane down there in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's the battle of the transfers. They brought in 3 transfer quarterbacks, and it's a real battle right now. There's not a definitive guy. I think this one's going to, from people I've talked to, go right up to game 1. I don't think that there's a definite option, but they have a couple different places. Shahan mentioned him earlier. The big one is BYU transfer Jake Retzloff coming in super late, so that's naturally going to put him behind the curve. From what I've been told, like he's ramping up well. He's really starting to get into a groove, and he's capitalized on the fact that Iowa transfer Brandon Sullivan is dealing with an ankle injury, and that's allowed him to get more time. He played well in a recent scrimmage that they had. They've also got Ball State transfer Caden Samanza, who is very much in the mix as well. So it's a 3-man race. Hasn't got as much attention as Hugh Freeze, but John Summerall has talked publicly how he might use multiple guys in multiple ways. So I think everyone's just getting weird this year, Richard. We'll get some different weird looks. Just outsider perspective, you feel like just based on the pedigree, Retzloff probably ends up being the guy. But again, it's a real battle. And, they have a tough schedule to start. Northwestern, South Alabama, Duke, then Ole Miss, their first 4 games. So like some of these other situations we've talked to, not a lot of time to ramp up. They kind of have to figure it out pretty soon here. So it's one to keep an eye on as we head into week 1.
And we bring up this UNLV and Tulane QB battle situation because, frankly, it's going to be key in shaping the college football playoff race, because one of these teams is going to have to be the team that gets the G5 automatic bid to the playoff like Boise State did last year. But there's another team, James Madison, who Chris Hummer probably has the weirdest QB situation of any of these contending teams that we haven't really talked about, but it is deeply, deeply uncertain for the Dukes. Chris, brother, you muted, baby. We got to hear you.
Unfortunately, this
no
is
one can mute like Chris Hummer. He's the master at it.
That's how insidery it is. He can't even say it to us out loud.
I try. I was trying to be respectful with the typing and the texting during the thing, and I muted myself, and that's on me. That's totally me. But yeah, James Madison's battle is very interesting. It's kind of an unfortunate one, to be honest. Like, this is a team that is the Sun Belt preseason favorite. I think has a really good chance of making the playoff potentially if things go well with their season. But their would-be starter, Alonzo Barnett, got hurt at the end of last season in the bowl game. He's still recovering from that injury. I think he's been in a black non-contact jersey throughout fall camp, and there's a real kind of question as to whether he's going to be ready to go for the season. And that leads us to a situation where you've got 2 transfer quarterbacks vying for that starting job, really. One of them is very familiar to people. It's Matthew Sluka, who has a lot of experience with Bob Chesney. He was his quarterback at Holy Cross, obviously famously at UNLV last season, transferred midway through the season, and now he's at James Madison. And I think people presume he's the starter, and he might end up winning this job. But they also have Camden Coleman, somebody who doesn't get a lot of attention nationally. He's a transfer from Richmond, but he was really good last year. If you go and look at the advanced metrics, he was a top 10 passer in the FCS, brings a different dimension than what Matthew Sluka does to the field. And I think that battle is still ongoing. And when you add in, it's definitely still ongoing, I'll just say that. And when you add in the element of Alonzo Barnett's injury, there's just a lot of uncertainty at the top of that room. They have 3 really good arms, but I think there's still a lot of decisions to be made there ahead of week 1.
Yeah, I think James Madison's situation is so interesting because of how different Sluka and Coleman are. Again, we just talked about with UNLV. Bob, free game, free advice. Put them both out on the field. Let's get weird, man. 2 quarterback system. It can work. Somebody's going to do it. Somebody's going to do it. And you're all going to say, Richard was crazy for saying it, but somebody's going to do it this season, and it's going to work.
All right. Memory hold this. I'm trying to remember because I had to, I think, watch it for us. Didn't Michigan do this, and didn't Warren get hurt when they do you guys remember this? Where I feel like they had a double QB thing, and Alex Orgeron threw a pass and crashed, and a guy crashed into something off the sidelines. I don't know if I'm making this up. I feel like I had to watch this game.
Did you dream this?
Michigan
a lot of times last year, so maybe I remember this at some point.
There's a lot of fever dream from that last season with Michigan's offense. I will say that.
Yeah, and Michigan also did the audition thing where they had one guy start the first game and then another guy start the second game. And it was, first of all, it was basically saying to the opponent, we don't really respect you. So it also had that to be concerned with as well.
Real quick, I'm looking at the comments. Elijah in the comments says, why are we talking about Tulane? And Tulane might be the most consequential G5 team in the country this year in terms of their path to the playoff. This is a team with legitimate playoff hopes and a head coach that not to like get ahead of ourselves to carousel season, is going to be arguably the hottest name when a lot of these FCC jobs come up. So Tulane is very relevant to the direction of the season, and Northwestern's going to be a lot better this year. They're very optimistic about what Preston Stone brings to the offense and the dimension. So I think it's a very interesting game.
Yeah,
I mean, I know that I picked them when we had to make our playoff picks. I picked Tulane as my G6 team to make the playoff. So maybe I'm more bullish than the average person.
Don't spoil alert. That's next Monday over at CBSSports.com. Make sure and check out all of our national expert picks.
Jack, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to spoil.
But John's point, I think, is really interesting because John was talking earlier about Auburn. Auburn, if that season goes south early, there are some folks that are going to want Hugh Freeze out of that job. And John Summerall, as far as I'm concerned, would be a leader in the clubhouse to potentially take that job, an SEC job that I think he could be in and really star. So it'll be interesting to see how both those things shake out, both Tulane's situation and Auburn's, as well as other SEC jobs, I should say, as we go through this season. Quick break. When we come back, College Football Insiders. Fellas, we got games this week. It's week 0. We got actual football. We'll talk about it next.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back, College Football Insiders. It's week 0. There's actual football, and there is a tantalizing matchup across the pond. Farmageddon, Kansas State and Iowa State get it on in Ireland, of all places. I think it's interesting when you talk about the logistics and how these teams are going about their business. Talked to somebody at Kansas State earlier this week. They're going to drive to Kansas City later this evening, and they're going to fly out Wednesday night over their overnight flight. They're going to put their players through activities all day on Thursday, work them out, get them tired so that they can stay on kind of a regular sleep schedule so they don't mess up their sleep schedule when they get over there. What we know about football coaches hate uncertainty. And well, an overnight flight with some guys who haven't even been on a plane before, that's uncertainty. So how bodies respond, how players will respond to that as they get into game prep, final game prep, I should say, is going to be really interesting as far as how Farmageddon shakes out. But this is a business trip. This is a business trip for both teams. I don't think Kansas State's going to be doing a lot of sightseeing over there in Dublin when they get over there. But Shahan, this is a key Big 12 race from week 0, from the outset of the season. How do you see Farmageddon playing out, and how do you think it will shape the Big 12 race, I should say?
Is this like one of the biggest week 0 games that we've ever had? Like, this is a huge game, not just for this season, but for the Big 12 race. And when I look at this Iowa State versus Kansas State game, like this, I think, will decide who is a contender in the Big 12 and who's not. Because here's the reality. In the Big 12, 7-2 is probably what's required to get into the conference championship game. And not only will you pick up a loss here, you'll also lose a tiebreaker against another team that potentially could be in that conference championship race. So hugely, hugely consequential game. And a lot of talent, a lot of stars, I think, in this game. Like, this is a situation, I think, where Kansas State, of course, they have for them a relatively down season going 9-4, ultimately missing out on the Big 12 title game. But they sort of knew that the first year under Avery Johnson at quarterback was going to be a little up and down. And you saw the highs. In fact, 25 touchdowns is the most by a Kansas State quarterback in program history. They also had 10 plus interceptions in some of these games. So I think they're hoping that he can be a little bit more consistent. For Iowa State, it's really all about losing those 2 NFL receivers, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, who are both now with the Houston Texans. They feel like they've restocked with Chase Sowell coming over from East Carolina and Xavier Townsend from UCF, but like, even if those guys are really good, it could still be a substantial step down. Where they hope to be better is they hope to be healthier, especially in the front 7. They had to play a lot of young players during their run to an 11-win season and the Big 12 title game last year. They feel like that's going to give them a chance to potentially take a step forward, even with some of the turnover that they've got. But I give Kansas State the edge in this game. I think that they're a team that's just a little bit further along. I think that they have more dynamic pieces on offense. But this is going to be a really close game down to the fourth quarter. And right now, I think the line is only Kansas State -3.
Well, one, I love Jaden Higgins as a fantasy football sleeper. You guys can thank me later for that one. But yeah, I think to hit on something that I think is going to be a theme on the show throughout, and maybe we're starting it early, but Chris talking about John Summerall triggered it for me. Matt Campbell did a great job of revitalizing the interest in him a year ago. He was a hot name. UNC really liked him before they ended up going to Bill Belichick. This is going to be a big season of movement. We're all expecting it. We all talk to different people. Everyone's bracing for major movement in the SEC and elsewhere. And games like this can have a big impact on how we view guys at the end of the year. You win a game like this, you get momentum. We saw it with Matt a year ago, beating Iowa, getting that team on a roll, and all of a sudden you start feeling bigger and better about him. So Campbell's a name that no one's been able to get him to leave yet, but he will be a hot name again. And if you can win a game like this where all eyes are on, it's the only big game that we're thinking about. If you win a game like this over a major opponent like Kansas State, it just revitalizes that interest. And as ADs and search firms are putting together their early lists, which, as you guys know, are happening right now before the game.
No, of course not.
Campbell can just kind of
the job is filled. Now, I will say it is funny, right? So we put together our CBS Sports coach rankings, and the Big 12. Obviously, I got a close eye on the Big 12 because of my background there. And so Matt Campbell jumped up to number 1 in our coach rankings in the Big 12 this year, which I think is very deserved. But it is very funny to me how quickly reputations change based on just what happened the previous season. Because guess what? Matt Campbell was a good coach last year too, before he had the 11-win season, the historic first 10-win season in the history of Iowa State football. Whereas now Chris Kleiman fell down to 3. Right. And I think that he's going to have a chance to maybe, if they have a good year, move back up to 2 or 1. So that's how fast perception can change in this sport, even, by the way, among the experts, hopefully like us who cover it closely, because when you have these moments to shine, I was asked for a long time by Kansas State fans, why do I not consider Chris Kleiman to be at or above the level of Matt Campbell when he's had seasons of that level? And heading into 2022, my answer was, well, he hasn't had the breakout season. He hasn't had the run to the conference championship game. At the time, he didn't have a conference championship, right? And that changed things in 2022. And now you consider him among the top 15 coaches in college football. Both of these coaches have an opportunity to continue to move up, especially if this season goes the way that, frankly, both of them believe that it can for their programs.
I will say one thing about this game is you kind of set the tone for the season, and that seems obvious for week 1, but I think it's worth pulling the lens back on Kansas State specifically and Avery Johnson. I don't know if people remember, but they chose Avery Johnson over Will Howard a year and a half ago. This is who they bet their program on and their future on. And if you do that and you want the return that you're expecting for somebody you've made a huge investment in, you need to be able to make a run to the Big 12 championship. And for Avery Johnson this season and Kansas State this season, that's, I think if I was the fan base, what my expectation would be. This is the way you start your year off. And that's what makes this Iowa State game so critical for them. We talked earlier about how Iowa State is working on a lot of new, and Kansas State isn't working as much, but I would note they're going to have 2 brand new offensive tackles out there. They had a really hard time in the portal, ultimately landing on the offensive tackles they did. They lost their starting tackle to Oregon in one case. They had to double dip in the portal a couple times to go find the right guy. They eventually got Terrence Enos from Pitt, who I think is going to start at right tackle for them. So there are some unanswered questions there too. And you really hope as a fan base when you turn on the TV on Saturday, and I assume most of them aren't traveling to Dublin, because that's tough to think, right?
More than you think.
That's that trip of a lifetime. That's awesome. But I just desperately, if I'm a Kansas State fan, hope I see the growth and the progress from Avery Johnson that I think a lot of people around that program think is possible. A lot of people nationally, when you look at his potential, think he can be a top 10 quarterback in the country, an early round draft pick when you look at his skill set. But you have to see that growth as a passer. And if I'm a Kansas State fan, I'm very hopeful that emerges and blossoms in week 1 against Iowa State in a big game.
Well, and I'll tell you what, this has been a sort of golden generation for players in the state of Kansas. Avery Johnson being among them, Dylan Edwards, the running back, Lincoln Cure, the tight end coming in. And you look at Kansas State, they've managed to keep the vast majority of them home. So this is bigger than just, hey, let's continue to build our program at a high level, you are setting the tone in the state of Kansas, where you've got a resurgent University of Kansas, where you've got a rising University of Missouri that's trying to fight for some of those players, especially in the Kansas City metro. This is a tone-setting game in so many ways for that program. And again, it's one of the reasons that I feel like they are going to be really motivated to come out and put on a show.
Elsewhere in the Sunflower State, Shahan, you just brought it up. Kansas Jayhawks, Lance Leipold, another guy who did not forget how to coach football just because Kansas fell off just a little bit last year. Hopefully Kansas has a healthy Jalen Daniels at quarterback, and they could be a really interesting team in the Big 12 race as well. But they got to get past Fresno. What Fresno is bringing in with new head coach Matt Entz, don't sleep on the Bulldogs coming into a brand new Booth Stadium and spoiling the party, Shahan.
And by the way, Matt Entz, former head coach at North Dakota State, took over for Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. So, I mean, he is somebody who knows how to build a winning culture. It's year one, right? Like, I mean, obviously you think that there's going to be some growing pains. They do start EJ Warner, the son of Kurt, and a 6th-year player at quarterback for them this year. But when I look at Kansas, though, like you said, this is supposed to, in a similar way to what I just described with Kansas State, this is supposed to be a coming out party for them. They're opening this brand new humongous facility. It's actually kind of interesting. They posted a video of a drone shot of the stadium. And right now, because of the fact that they're doing it in phases, half of it is done and half of it is not. But it actually is really cool because you get that contrast of on one side there are these metal bleachers and on the other it looks like it's freaking Arsenal Stadium or something. It looks incredible. And so I think that it's going to be a really, really interesting setting for this game. And I think that one other piece too is Kansas has not given up on football even in the rev share era, right? They are putting a lot of money and resource into trying to create a winner for Lance Leipold. And they turn over a lot of their roster after numerous 5th and 6th year guys graduated from last year's team, including obviously a guy like Devin Neal at running back. But they feel like with center Bryce Foster, a former Texas A&M player who broke out for them last year, they feel like with some of the receivers they brought in, some of the defensive linemen that they've brought in as well, like Justice Finkley coming over from Texas, they feel like they're going to have a chance to be even better. So we'll have to wait and see whether that's true.
One thing I won't have on College Football Insiders is any talk about Arsenal. You see the logo right here, up the Spurs always.
I was just throwing out a random stadium. I don't know, man. I should have said Wembley or something. I don't know.
I
have to say, is every sports writer a fan of the Spurs? I mean that sincerely. That sincerely. Every single person.
No, there are so many Liverpool people, stolen valor Liverpool people in the college football writer intelligentsia. They're there. It's not all Spurs folks. Even though producer Aaron is a Liverpool guy.
Yeah,
I will.
A Liverpool. I used to work at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, and they were huge soccer heads in there. I didn't grow up with it the same way, but we were spread out. We had an Arsenal. We actually had a oh my gosh, what's Tepper's team? Queens Park Rangers. We had. I tried to get into Crystal Palace because I have family in South London. Did not stick. I'll be honest with you.
You got off at the wrong time. They just won the FA Cup, man.
I know.
Crystal Palace had a run. Producer Aaron's the luckiest one among us, though. He was at Wembley last week to see.
Man,
John, are we gonna see the Real Madrid hat come out on College Football Insiders this season, or how?
I guess we have to ask producer Aaron. I didn't know if hats were okay or not, but if they are, then I might need to break it out. I was also thinking, we kept saying business trip. We all really blew it that not a single one of us is going to Ireland this week. I don't know how we botched that one, but one of us should have gotten a business trip out of this.
Let me give Jack a call. I'm the Big 12 guy. I should be able to get out there. I think that should be very much an approved trip.
I don't know how Skydance feels about that.
I have family that lives in Ireland. I don't know. Do I get the Irish? We'll figure it out. Next, we can put in our request now for who gets to go to Germany next year.
I'll pass on that one.
Not strong.
I don't want to see Savion Hitter in Germany.
Last week 0 game to touch on, Stanford and Hawaii. Guys, Stanford may have a problem because Hawaii -2.5 home favorite in the parking lot stadium that they've got. Aloha Stadium cannot come back soon enough for the Warriors. Hawaii can win this ball game. But Chris, we talked about your freshman All-American list earlier in the show. John Anthony Hall, top 200 recruit in at Stanford. Unfortunately, he's about all Stanford has from a talent perspective heading into this season.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the group a question. Over under returning catches for Stanford's wide receivers? 1.
1.
Yeah, the answer is 1. The answer is 1. Like, they have 1 returning catch among their whole wide receiver group, which is insane when you think about it. But
that guy must be feeling himself walking into that room. Be like,
y'all ain't done nothing.
I'm the only guy here that's had a catch at Stanford. Yes, it's incredible stuff. But yeah, John Anthony Hall is somebody that I think people over there are very bullish on. I don't know if it's going to pop against Hawaii necessarily. He's somebody that's been banged up during fall camp a little bit. But when you talk to people in that program and you're looking for a guy that at some point this season is going to emerge as a dude for them, like he is one of them. It's hard to say he's the most talented player like on the roster offensively, but he's certainly the most explosive. And I felt very comfortable
Chris, I think you could say he's the most talented player on the roster.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're underdogs against Hawaii. So I'm trying to be generous here. But yes, Hall is going to play for Stanford. And I think by season's end, he can be a household name. I will say I think it's their left tackle. I'm not sure if he plays left or right. Khalil House, their offensive tackle, is somebody that like everybody in the country would want if he went on the portal. Like, so he is the most like Khalil House, like pay attention to him. Like he's a dude, but like that roster needs all the help it can get.
Guys, do not sleep on Hawaii this season. I think Hawaii could be a team that gets back to being a bowl team. They've been on the cusp the last couple of years. Obviously, Timmy Chang at head coach, great vibes for Hawaii, given what they were able to do when Timmy Chang was out there slinging the rock. Micah Elihado, understandably a small sample size last season, but he did show that he can run the show in that run and shoot offense. I'm interested in what Hawaii can do. Again, Hawaii can win this game. They are the favored team. One last thing before we get out of here on today's episode of College Football Insiders. It's not about week 0, but it's about our old pal Ed Orgeron. Last week we talked about some groomers, Orgeron rumors also going around. I believe he told a podcast recently that he wants to get back in the game. John, do you think he's serious? Do you think he's just bored? Does he need to go back on the beach in South Florida? What's going on with our old pal Ed O?
Well, let me preface by saying this. I badly wish he would come back to college football. It's a sadder, more dim place without him. There was few things that I enjoy more than hearing Edo talk. Him ripping off his shirt, fist pumping. He's our version of Hulk, and we need him back. So I want to start there. I am skeptical that he is coming back. I think he's very happy retired. I think he's an entertainer. I think, he likes to stir the pot a little bit. I think he realizes that if he says, I'm getting that itch, the headlines, they're going to start cropping up. And I think that's kind of what happened here. Hey, we're talking about it. So it worked for him. I don't think it's imminent that he is coming back to college football anytime soon. I think he's living a great life. He seems as tan as ever. So I think he's getting plenty of beach time. I think he's doing all right. But I think I would love for him to come back in some capacity. And I think people forget too. I mean, he's probably one of you put him in probably all-time top 5 greatest recruiters. And so, he's hanging around Miami a lot. His son is working at Miami. Maybe down the line, old Mario Cristobal says, hey, Ed, let's get you back as D-line coach or something. I mean, he would be an incredible addition to any program. I just don't think he needs to do that. I think he's doing plenty fine just now.
John, what about this? We talked about John Summerall and Auburn earlier. John Summerall out at Tulane. How about we bring Ed Orgeron back close to home as Tulane's head coach? Why not? Who says no?
If that happens, I'm telling Trey and Jack I'm moving to New Orleans. I will just document Ed O. That's the only thing I'm going to write. I think it'd be incredible. I mean, I think he would do very well there. He's already won 1 national championship in the state of Louisiana. I think he could do well again. I think it's about, I think the key is, and he's not the only guy. I mean, I don't know if we've talked about it. Jimbo Fisher's starting to make those rounds as well. He's getting the itch again. These guys, they don't know what else to do in a lot of ways besides football. But I think the question you have about anybody who's been out for a year or more, A, the game has changed so much. So can you get yourself back up to speed? But B, we all know this. It's 100-hour weeks. It's an insane dedication. Do you have that burning desire to actually want to do it again? or are you bored that you're at home and you don't know what else to do? So you guys all know, and Sean, you're there in Texas. Jimbo's time at Texas A&M did not end very well.
It's the first I'm hearing about it.
I would be very skeptical about giving that guy another big opportunity, given the way he's handled some of the most recent ones.
And I feel like this is sort of my fundamental question with all three of those guys, right? With Gruden, with Edo, with Jimbo, is like, what do you actually want? Like, do you want the chance to coach football again? Because there are many avenues for you to do that. Do you want the opportunity to like be a big deal again? Because there are many avenues for that don't require you to do some of this stuff. But like, you mentioned like Tulane's a great job, right? Tulane's a great job. Yeah, obviously, if Edo was like super motivated and they came to him, like, yeah, I think that's something that makes sense. But like, if Southern Miss came to him, obviously that job's not opening, but like, if a job like that came to him, if a Conference USA job came to him, if a high level FCS job came to him and said, Coach O, we want you to come here, like, what's the point exactly for him? Like, why exactly would he be doing it? If he just loves to coach football again, then he can do that. But like, I don't know that you go on the national podcast tour and do all this sort of stuff. And again, when you won a national championship at LSU, is that beneath you at a certain point? Is it not really worth your time to go and be the ULM's head coach? I don't know. Like, that's a question that I think that when push comes to shove, the answer will be no.
I will say real quick, and like, it ended poorly for a variety of reasons in Les Miles' case, but like Les Miles' like career ended with the biggest thud of all thuds. And I think we think about Les Miles in a much different way historically than we would have if you would have just hung it up after LSU. And if you're at Orgeron, I know like that last season you had in Baton Rouge, like ended in a pretty contentious divorce in a way, depending on who you talk to, but like, he is an absolute legend around there. Like, why solely like that last great season of your career by going somewhere and suffering?
Why join the Washington Wizards?
Yeah, like, it just, he's very rich, very tan. Like, go hang out on the beach in Miami and have a good time, man. Like, that's the life we all want. But these guys are
already rested.
These guys are built different. I will say that. Like,
I think Orgeron is doing that. I think he's living that life. I think he's very happy. He's going to continue to do that. I think Fisher's is more genuine, to be honest. And I think that, Richard, you mentioned earlier, I've had people around Jimbo tell me, and he's flirted with them multiple times in the past, if Auburn were to open up, you will see the Jimbo campaign behind the scenes to try to get that.
Oh, that would be the most Auburn hire ever.
And it's been teed up for him in the past as well.
But I do think that like that distinction is well taken, because I think in the case of Coach O, like, things ended badly for a lot of dumb reasons, right? With Jimbo, he got fired for being a bad football coach. That's why he got fired. I think that is a much more motivating situation to kind of say, hey, kind of nobody really is happy with me or likes me right now. My reputation is kind of bad. So can I fix my reputation versus, like Chris mentioned with Coach O, it's just be the mayor of Baton Rouge. Like, don't worry with all this football stuff. It's fine. You proved yourself. You got nothing to prove to anybody. I do think that situation's a little different with Jimbo Fisher.
I think that for me, when I think about it, all of these guys, what makes them great, and is also both the rose and the thorn, is how much competitive spirit that they have. These guys are the S-tier 1% competitive people in any phase of life you ever come across. And they have all had the highest levels of success that college football can offer you. That's intoxicating. And when you have it, you want it again. You want it back. And so, yeah, if it was any of the four of us, we'd be on the golf course. Well, not Shahan. Shahan doesn't golf yet. Any of the four of us would be on the golf course with our buyout money, kick the feet up, have some Mai Tais, and call it a career. But the rest of these guys want to coach. They only know how to do one thing. The four of us only know how to do one thing as well. It's deliver the best, the greatest college football news to you on the College Football Insiders. Had a lot of fun today with my guys, Chris Hummer, Shahan Jayaraja, John Talty. We'll see you next week on the College Football Insiders.